Joining me now, Sky News contributor Graham Richardson. Richo, we'll get to the situation in Victoria very shortly, but your old mate, former Prime Minister Paul Keating, has been out and about today. Now, he's been highly critical of the fact that Australians have been able to access at least 10K, possibly 20K, from their superannuation accounts. What he's saying is that it's entrenched inequality between Australian generations. Do you think he's got a point?
Yeah, I do. It's a really hard one to argue because people are always going to want their money. But the truth is, this is about a public policy to try and ease the pressure on government funding. And I think we've all got to do more to look after ourselves in our later years. Keating always had that right. He got it right in 1989 and he's still right.
Richo, let's switch to Victoria now. This is an ongoing, emerging tragedy in our southern states, and of course they're now talking about meat shortages. Daniel Andrews, there was a photo of him on today's front page of the Canberra Times. I've got to say, Richo, a picture tells 1,000 words. He looked harrowed. He looked incredibly, incredibly tired. I know you're a big fan of Dan Andrews, and of course, many would argue that this has been thrust upon him, but life getting very, very difficult for the Victorian Premier.
Very difficult, and it shows. I think the burden that he's carrying is obvious in every single muscle in his face, in every single wrinkle. You can see how much pressure he's under. And I don't envy him the task that he faces, because trying to build a wall a la Trump around a virus is just not possible. And I don't know how this will pan out in the coming weeks, but it may get an awful lot worse before it gets better, and we should be prepared for that. In Victoria, the horse, as they say in the classics, mate, has bolted.
Yeah, it has, Richo. There's no doubt about that. All right, well, let's talk about New South Wales and Queensland. In New South Wales, Gladys Berejiklian is getting increasing calls to basically ban flights in and out of Victoria. I mean, there's very strong stringencies around quarantines at that border area. Do you think we're getting to the stage now? We're up around 235 active cases in New South Wales. Are we getting to the point where Berejiklian might have to impose tougher restrictions?
I think we are, yes. I don't like the idea of it, but I think she'll have to pretty soon. 235 is good, but as you know, Peter, it can get an awful lot worse very quickly. And so we need to keep up our guard, not drop it. And I think she's capable of doing that and seems to be moving in the right direction most of the time here. I'm not being critical at the moment. In any event, this is not a time for partisan politics. This is a time for all hands on deck, all shoulders to the wheel, and we all should be doing whatever we can.
And Richo, many have considered Anastasia Palaszczuk's response to this crisis as good as any in the country. She's now getting under increasing pressure for that cluster in Logan last week where 3 women came from Victoria. And of course, they roamed the streets of South Brisbane for 8 days, spreading the virus. So that's a major worry. Now I've got 3 Logan men, similarly, telling porkies to authorities. Are we at the point now where we got to throw the book at these people?
Well, I think you really got to sanction them pretty heavily. They certainly should be facing very significant fines because this is a serious business. You go out when you've got this virus, you can kill people. And I don't think it gets more serious than that, does it? So as far as I'm concerned, whatever penalty is the maximum is the one that should be applied to these men and women.
Now, Richo, earlier in the week we saw a fair bit of criticism about a weekend gathering of worshippers, Muslim worshippers, and there were 400 that went there. There was a special exemption that was granted by Health Minister Brad Hazzard. What are your thoughts on that particular exemption? Because many are considering that was over the top.
I've got to say, I don't think it should have been granted. It wouldn't matter what religion it was. I just don't see how you can exempt 400 people when you've got the police hunting down individuals who do the wrong thing. It seems to me to be absurd. If you can have that kind of exception to the rule, Peter, then the rule's not worth having.
And just finally, Graham, we've got Joe Biden to announce his vice presidential running mate, probably in the next couple of days. Speculation, of course, that it will be a woman, and of course that will probably go down very well with the Democrats in the United States. But of course, Trump just keeps bumbling along, and the polls are widening. And I know we spoke about it last week, Richo, but he's really pushing the cart up the hill right now, Mr. Trump.
Oh, he certainly is, and the cart's full of stuff you don't want to talk about. I think he's in all sorts of strife. I don't believe he can win. I don't believe there's any rabbit he can pull out of any hat. I think he's a goner, and I think the world will be better for it, and so will the United States.
Good on you, Graham Richardson. Always great to see you. Thanks for joining us on Sky News across Australia.
Thanks, Peter.